So thanks everybody for coming. I think I'm standing between you and whatever the end of day cocktails are, so I appreciate this. I think I'm the last session of the day. The first question is, are you enjoying the conference, whatever you came for? Are you getting the kind of information that you're looking for, talking to the vendors that you wanted to talk to? Yeah? Okay. I mean, sometimes, the shows are really exciting and sometimes they're not, so that's why I wanted to ask. This is our first time here. So I'm Adam Horwitz. I'm a solution consultant with ServiceNow. My background is that I've been in cybersecurity for a really long time. I guess my claim to fame is that I put Walgreens on the internet. I used to live in Chicago. I did a lot of business with companies in Chicago. I had my own internet company back in the 90s, or my own security company back in the 90s. I literally registered Walgreens.com, installed their firewall, integrated with their email, which I think was Microsoft Mail at the time. Might have been CC Mail. I did a lot of those, and then they asked me to integrate to some mainframe system they had, which I'd never done before, and I figured it out. So that's my claim to fame. I was around at the time that most companies didn't have domain names registered, and I was thinking, I should go out and I should register Coke.com, Pepsi.com, this stuff. Why would I do that? That would be sort of dishonest, so I didn't do it. I probably could have made a ton of money, huh? I guess I'm too honest. But I've been in security for a long time, and so before joining ServiceNow, I was always an endpoint security solution guy. I was implementing endpoint solutions like firewalls or email gateways or authentication like RSA Secure ID. So this is the first time I've been on the other side where I'm with a platform company, and it's really interesting because of the viewpoint and from my viewpoint of what we can do with our technology and how it differs and how it really can affect what an organization can do versus just an endpoint solution. But previously I was always with endpoint solutions. So what we're going to cover today is automation and orchestration, the CISO's secret weapon against Excel and IT silos, because a lot of people are still using Excel for things in IT. I'm an IT person at my core, and so I know how easy it is to manipulate lists of things like vulnerabilities and security incidents and other things in spreadsheets, and I think a lot of companies are still doing that. So I'd like to get a show of hands in the room of anyone who might be an existing ServiceNow customer. Okay, and is everybody familiar with ServiceNow from the standpoint of IT service management, help desk, ticketing, which we're most often associated with? Is there anybody that doesn't know anything about ServiceNow? Okay, so just from a little background before I get into this. So I think personally that the term platform is really overhyped in the industry and just with technology products in general. But from a ServiceNow standpoint, I would say it's not overhyped. We have a true platform with a tremendous amount of capabilities, and those capabilities are available to all of the application or purpose-built apps that we have on the ServiceNow platform. It's not unlike your phone. Your phone has GPS and data capabilities and graphic capabilities and the ability to connect to earphones or Bluetooth, all of these capabilities, right? And there are thousands of applications that people have built. Some are very special purposes to address business applications, others are entertainment, and they all plug into the platform and they leverage these capabilities. And so as Apple creates more capabilities, adds more capabilities to the phone, or Google does, the applications are able to take advantage of this new technology. And that is really at its core of how ServiceNow works, with the first application being the IT service management application and capability many years ago. And then we realized we really have a platform and started developing other applications, purpose-built vertical applications for cybersecurity, for IT business management, for financial, for vendor management, third-party risk, all these different applications. And so the capabilities that we're going to talk about today that I think are applicable to being able to automate in your environment are all core platform capabilities in ServiceNow that can be leveraged with all of our application. So organizations have invested a lot in a lot of security products. This list could probably go on for 5 minutes with different vendor names popping up here. There's a tremendous amount of vendors in the security space, and a lot of these vendors have many different products that are available to you. I've seen statistics that every organization has like around 75 security products, and the first time I saw that I thought, well, that's crazy, 75 is a lot, and I sort of started rattling them off in my head and thinking about them, and the numbers actually started getting very high because an antivirus solution is technically a security product, and some companies might have 2 or 3. So very quickly you get into a lot of these security products. The security products are supposed to protect you. They're supposed to detect things for you, so protect and detect. But what they do is they generate a lot of work. They're not really good at helping you respond. All of these products, all of these security products in the technology space, right, they're all designed to basically give you information, alerts, other type of information, which ultimately somebody needs to respond to, right? You need to do some work, and they're not really great at that. So we're still struggling with responding. We're still struggling with, we get these alerts from systems, we have vulnerabilities, we have threat intelligence data, and how do we actually respond, right? What do we do to be more effective in our organization? We've just got too many alerts. If you have a SIM, you may have a SIM that's doing correlation. Maybe you have a SIM that doesn't have that capability, and you go in and you're looking or you're getting alerts, and it's just overwhelming. There are manual tools that you can use. Sometimes these solutions send them to you in emails, and then you're looking at emails and other, you're looking at these alerts and they're coming in multiple ways, right? Not everything is necessarily coming into a centralized point. And you're siloed from IT. So when you're doing work in an organization, you're very often, you're dealing with multiple parts of the organization. If you think back to the presentation that we saw during lunch, right, for State of Colorado, there was a lot of stuff going on, and people from different parts of the organization were involved. You had networking people, you had the people that managed the VoIP technology, you have people that manage security, you have the people who are they're just using these systems. Their job is just to operate these systems and to make sure that vendors or employees are being paid. But as technology people, I think, and I'm including myself in this, a lot of times we sort of forget that at the end of the day, our purpose here is to support the business. And the business is generally involved in, supporting the population or a particular, profit-making enterprise. Government is not, but we're here to support the taxpayers, right? We're here to support the people that are using our systems. And so the reason that we're combating vulnerabilities is not because it's fun, it's because we don't want the systems to be affected, because they need to provide the function to the organization ultimately for the people that are using them or getting value from them, right? And so a lot of times it does involve people in other parts of the organization that maybe should be a business process owner that approves something. If you're going to patch a vulnerability, you run a risk that a system could be taken down. You also run a risk that installing a patch, for example, could negatively impact the system because you're making a change. And even though the hope and the intention is to solve a problem, not create one, sometimes it does. And so being able to respond, being able to involve people from other parts of the organization, breaking down the silos, knowing that when you ask somebody in another part of an organization to do something and tracking that, this is where automation comes in. And we just can't do it anymore the way we've been doing it. So one of the ways we try to address this is by hiring more teams, right? Security teams are going to respond by trying to hire more resources. And we've got some statistics on that. 64% plan to hire additional dedicated resources in the next 12 months. 50% of the respondents have hiring plans to increase their headcounts, right? So there are a lot of jobs there. We're all struggling. I go out and I talk to customers all the time, and everybody is looking for security people. Hey, do you know somebody that's got skills in this area? Do you know somebody who's got skills in that area? Sometimes they're looking for people with operating system or database skills, and other times they're looking for people with skills that address a particular technology that they've either bought or they're buying, like a SIM, a vulnerability scanner, some cloud access type application or piece of hardware. So that's what everybody's doing to try to address the problem, and they're not really looking at trying to automate. in a sensible way. So there's a global shortage of cybersecurity people, and from what I can tell from the statistics is there are all of these jobs out there, and statistics on LinkedIn and some of the job sites are showing is that they're not even all being looked at. There are so many jobs that are out there is that people aren't even looking at all the different jobs that are available because people are in demand. So is security orchestration?
And that statistic on whether people are looking at jobs, do you know if that represents public sector or commercial sector or just any?
That would just, yeah, there's no, I don't have a breakdown on that. Do you have any insight to it?
I would imagine, no, but I imagine that the number's even less for public sector cybersecurity jobs.
Probably.
Pay as well.
Right, yeah, yeah. And no, that's a good point. And there could also be a concern about the technology, right?
Sure.
You can go to a company like Google, and they're probably going out and buying the latest and greatest and fanciest technology tools out there for cybersecurity. And if you go somewhere else, they might not have that kind of a budget. And so they can't afford the latest technology. Or maybe they can afford the technology, but then they can't afford to send us to training, which is just as important. All of this technology is no good if we can't actually get the training to learn how to use it most effectively, right? Common problem. We get, as IT people, we get tasked to implement technology that the company buys. First problem is we don't usually get to fully implement it because we're pulled off the project, we're sent down another path at some point. And the other problem is that we don't necessarily get the training, and so we're not using it as effectively as we could. So at the end of the day, the organization's not getting the maximum return on investment, right? So is security orchestration, automation, and response, SOAR, which is the acronym, the answer? Well, it's hot right now. It's been hot for a year or so, or maybe 2 years. A lot of statistics, a lot of analyst reports about that, and it is hot, and it is a way that we can address the problem. But we need to get the basics right first, right? All of this automation isn't any good if you don't sit down and think about the basics and what it is you're trying to accomplish and where it actually makes sense to start to automate. So let's talk a little bit about security incident response. So the core problem, as I mentioned earlier, just too much data. We've got data coming in from SIEMs, from firewalls, from endpoint. You've got network security, alerts coming in, vulnerability. It's just way too much, right? And then how do you respond to it? You want to be able to consolidate that information. You want to understand what's the business impact, right? Understanding the business context of what we do in cybersecurity is really important. And I talk to a lot of companies that are looking at technology to solve problems for them and to make some decisions for them without actually having the business context. They look at like the vulnerability information, and just because a vulnerability is really critical and it's being exploited on the internet, they think that maybe is the priority. But there may be not as critical, but more widespread vulnerabilities in their environment on other business systems, maybe critical business systems that they're not addressing. And they just don't have a good way of figuring that out. And so they're not using the resources that they have most effectively. So everybody's struggling to find and stop any kind of breaches. So getting alerts and having a way to respond to them is really critical, right? So we saw in the presentation today that it was a very long, drawn-out process to fully identify what was happening with the breach in Colorado, to contain it, to eradicate it, right, and to have that communication channel that was open. So statistically, if you look at on the left here, the first one, it's 96.7 days is the mean time to identify, and that's up from 190.7 days the previous year. So the statistics are not really showing that we're trending towards improvement, because every year there's just more security technology available to buy, more fancy, shiny objects to spend money on that provide good data, and we want that, but we're still just overwhelmed at the end of the day. So using automation and orchestration for incident response is what we need to do. So what that really starts with is to integrate the security products. So a typical example might be a SIEM, ArcSight, QRadar, Splunk, Logarithm, whatever your SIEM is to be able to to start to bring that information into a central point where we have a better view of what's happening. Not every single alert, because that's what the SIMs are designed to do, but the ones that are actionable, right? Where we actually need to start the process of working through a security incident. To bring that in, and then in step 2 here, to perform some sort of prioritization, to use information that we have that came in from the endpoint solution, which typically would be reporting into the SIM, but doesn't necessarily have to be reporting into the SIM. They have a lot of technical information about what they've identified that is qualifying this as some sort of a security incident that you should have some eyes on, and then to prioritize that with the business context. Information about the assets, the devices, the systems, the databases, the users. Maybe it's a CEO versus a clerk, in the warehouse, right? That all has to do with prioritizing how important this security incident is. At this point, we still haven't figured out what we're supposed to do with it. We just know that if an analyst is looking at 10 things in his queue, there should be a way through automation that he or she can really identify what the priority should be at that moment. And then we want to add in some threat intelligence. There's a lot of threat intelligence that's available. There are on-prem solutions that people have. There are databases that people have. There are a lot of cloud solutions. Some are free, some are not. But there's a lot of threat intelligence that's out there. And the more that you can access, the better informed you can be to make decisions on what to do, right? And so ideally you want to have multiple sources of threat intelligence. And then what we want to do is we want to be able to determine the response action and then start to remediate. So remediating a threat could be that we want to block a firewall port, or maybe we want to isolate a host, or maybe we need to run some kind of a tool to remove something, and then if that fails, we might actually need to engage another part of the organization, probably IT operations, to reload the operating system and all the applications. And by the way, if we're doing this, we need to know what were all the applications, what were the configurations on these systems before this happened, so we can put it back. Or maybe we're going to, we're going to go to a backup, right? But we still have to have some of this information depending upon its load the operating system and then restore data or do a full system restore. Questions at this point as I continue through? Okay. So this is a maturity model for security incident response, and this is our view of where this breaks down into these different levels from 0 to 3. And I think we were 0 to 5 in the logarithm presentation this morning, which had a different view. It had a view of maturity specific to logs and logging of data and being able to make decisions in a SIM, where this is from the ServiceNow viewpoint of having all kinds of different information available to you and deciding how you're going to respond to it. So at 0, we have spreadsheets. Now, spreadsheet use is probably more common when you're talking about vulnerabilities, but we have spoken to customers that are using spreadsheets or lists for just managing security incidents. Is anyone here using spreadsheets for managing any of your security incidents, doing any kind of reporting? Okay, so there's one person that was like that, and everybody else was kind of like no or yes. Okay,
well,
great.
Question actually. So would you consider using spreadsheets for basically your CMDB as a?
Well, I'm going to talk about the CMDB. Using spreadsheets for your CMDB is definitely going to be a manual operation that would fall under 0 for anything. Yeah, exactly. Do you have a lot of assets?
Well, I don't now, but I used to.
Okay, and was it managed in a spreadsheet?
In some cases, yeah.
Yeah, we can talk. I think I might have a slide on that. We can kind of talk about the CMDB a little bit. So the problem with when you're at this level 0, you have limited visibility. It takes long to respond because you're looking up information, right? This is not necessarily a shared resource, or if it is a shared resource, everybody might not have the most current version. Maybe it's on SharePoint, which would be better than emailing it around, but it's very inefficient. So when we go out and we talk to people and we say, well, where are you today? in your incident response? Where do you feel that you fall in the maturity scale? Most of the organizations are somewhere around 0 or 1. You know, if they're being honest, we do meet with people that say we're a 2 or a 3, and they're generally a bunch of people in the room shaking their head and saying, no, we're really a 0 or a 1, right? So people are struggling with this, trying to get more advanced. Now, when we talk about orchestration, people tend to tell me they want to start doing things like we want to start blocking ports, we want to start talking to these other solutions that we have that we've spent a lot of money on, or here's our technology stack, which of these solutions do you integrate with? And I feel that that's getting a little bit ahead of the conversation, because although that's important, and being able to block ports or isolate a host or something like that is really important, you have to start with the basics. And the basics would be, let's have a way to capture the security incident information. Let's have a way to enrich it with information from threat intelligence sources, automatically preferably, so that people aren't logging into these different systems and collecting this information and maybe pasting it into a Word document. But actually the system is automatically collecting a lot of this information, thus eliminating all of this manual logging in and getting information, which in some cases, if people are logging into systems to get this information, that requires at least some level of training. So let's use as much automation as we can, so that maybe a level 1 analyst doesn't have to do any of this. The system just gathers it all for them, whereas a level 2 or 3 person escalating a security incident to a more technical level, somebody with deeper experience, maybe they would want to look at this information. But again, let's bring this information in automatically. So maturity model 1 would be that we start with some automated incident creation. Ideally, that would be something has bubbled up in your SIM or come in as an alert from a security tool that can immediately identify this is not questionable, but we know this is bad. We know it's malware, right? Or we know something is being accessed or reconfigured that's not supposed to. And have it come into a solution and have a process where an incident, a security incident, which is different than like a change help desk type incident, right? A security incident is created, and then we start doing that prioritization based upon having the business context, understanding what the role is of that particular system or the services that it runs, or if it's a desktop or a laptop, what is the role of the user, right? Because that all affects prioritization. There could be VIPs, and they need to get their systems fixed more quickly than maybe somebody else, right? Having a single system of record to be able to have that visibility where anybody in the organization with the proper roles who needs to be able to view this can view it. And also having the ability to restrict view of sensitive security incidents, malware on the CEO's laptop. If that got out publicly and you're depending upon what kind of organization you are, that could reflect very badly on the organization. If it was a public organization, it could negatively impact the stock price. But for a government agency, that can tarnish the credibility of the organization, right? So basic operations really starts with having a process, because all of this technology really comes down to people and processes, because that's how we most effectively use the technology that we're spending money on, is to define a repeatable process where automation is employed to use the technology in the most effective way, so that when it gets turned over to a human who's actually looking at it, a lot of that manual tasking, manual collection, manual analysis of the data has already been performed. Now from there you can get to the next level, which would be 2, which would be to be able to start pulling in threat intelligence information. You have a hash. What does this hash represent? It represents malware. Is this piece of malware known to be part of a larger attack? So that's where bringing in threat intelligence comes in, correlating that information, identifying whether or not there are systems that are part of a collective service that have some current history, where maybe this is part of a coordinated attack against part of the operation as opposed to just some kind of random security incident. Having a process which has been turned into what we at ServiceNow call a digital workflow, where that process can be basically programmed in like a flow chart, and based upon that, things start to happen automatically. Maybe it needs to be routed to somebody. Maybe notifications need to go out. Certain things happen with certain things, certain systems, and there's a process that says people should start getting notified about a potential security incident that's bad or some other information, and have that automatically happen per a defined process because you have a digital workflow. All of this results in getting that accelerated response and better decision making. And then being able to take that to the next step where you have playbooks. Phishing is a good example. What is the workflow that has to happen when you get a phishing incident? Everybody gets phishing incidents. You know, we all have that in common, right? And so there should be a workflow on how the incident handler is going to respond to that. Some of that might be automated, but there might be portions of that where there's some manual work that has to be done, or some manual decisions that have to be done based upon creating a search to go back into your email platform and search for other emails that match that phishing type, right? And so having a playbook, walking somebody through each of those processes and showing them what to do. Maybe it has to do with not phishing, but removing malware, right? Having a playbook that walks people through is part of that maturity model. And then being able to integrate with other tools, because what happens is that I go out and I talk to customers and I say, what SIM are you using, or what vulnerability management solution are you using? And very often the answer is, well, we are using this, but we're switching to that. So swapping technology in and out of your process is something that an automated process for orchestration needs to be able to handle, because your tools are going to change periodically, because that's the nature of our industry. Sometimes they can't keep up with the latest technical advantage of a competitor, and sometimes the tool just starts to wane in support and you decide you want to switch, right? And sometimes they're just too difficult to manage, or they don't support certain capabilities or operating systems or applications that you need, right? And so your processes are going to be tweaked over a period of time, but typically your processes aren't going to just be thrown out and replaced. For the most part, besides the tweaking that you're going to do on your processes as you evolve to a larger, more mature organization, or there are other changes in the organization, it's going to be, we're just going to swap this tool for that one. Maybe this does more things, and so you're going to want to enhance the process, the automation to do more things. But a lot of it is just that it might be better, faster, cheaper, and you don't have to retrain all the people. You don't have to replace your process. This is how you log in. This is how you do this. This is how you do that. Because once the automation is set up, that's going to happen for you. And the people that are actually working with this, trying to triage a security incident or respond to a security incident, aren't going to have to worry about that. So in order to get that effective response and decide how you're going to automate, you really need to ask yourself, what is it we're trying to do here? Is this technology tool stack that you want to integrate with, is it really important? Because what are we doing? Because integrations fall into a couple of different categories. There's integration where they're feeding information in, like a SIM. It's saying, hey, here's something that you need to get eyes on. Let's create an incident. That's one level of integration. That's pretty straightforward. Another level of integration is you're doing a query. You're taking something that's come in for a security incident, like a hash or an IP address or a file name, and you're querying a threat intelligence source and you're asking for information back. That's relatively simple, big payback on that. If you have more threat intelligence services or solutions versus less, that's okay, because that's more data points. And then the other part of that is the orchestration, where we want to go out and we want to do something with that. A common one is we want to block a firewall port, or we want to isolate a host. That's a good one, and you might do that a lot. You also might think you're going to do that a lot, but you're really not. One of the things that I ask customers is, are you doing that now? Or how often do you think you would actually be doing this? I mean, great, we can implement all the automation and orchestration you want, but are you actually going to use it? And think about the business. If you're going to do something like block a port or isolate a host, is that something that the analyst or somebody in IT should make the decision to do? Or is that something that a business owner should be approving? IT says this is bad, or IT security says this is bad and we need to do this, but that is going to negatively impact, your operation probably, right? Maybe, the public can't get to the website, can't get into a registration database, can't look up important information, Social Security, motor vehicle, whatever it is, can't file a claim for something, whatever it is, right? Maybe somebody who's sort of a business owner should actually approve that. So having the automation is great, but also being able to put those guardrails around it so that somebody pushes a button and says, this is the playbook, the response is that we want to block this, but it goes to somebody who actually has to approve it. And being able to have a conversation around that where if that person can see the information on the incident and you're tracking it too. Maybe this happens a lot and the business owner is saying, well, we can't turn that off. We can't negatively affect that. We have to, it's payroll. I mean, yeah, we understand that it's bad, but like the conversation at lunch, but we still need to pay people. People have mortgages, we owe money to vendors. I don't know that we should be shutting that off. Having a system that's tracking that, the fact that this is coming up, gives you the ability to start to say, we need to maybe make some decisions where this is automated or we're, this is coming up and IT security is saying this needs to be done and the business owners are saying, no, you can't do this. They don't understand the impact. Or maybe IT security doesn't really understand the impact, and now you have some data that you can use for justifying maybe spending money on more technology or implementing different technology. Is this resonating with you on security incidents? Okay, question.
You said faster, better, cheaper, and that doesn't work.
No, I didn't say faster, better, cheaper. I said faster. I said better. I didn't necessarily say cheaper. You might swap out technology because it is cheaper, but most likely you're going to swap out technology because there's something better. But your business processes, well, that's a decision made by the technology purchasers, by the cybersecurity people are going to decide. You're always going to have vendors telling you something is better, but you're going to make the decision. IT security is typically going to make the decision that they want to switch to a different technology product for a reason.
Usually they're on the bottom turtle in the stack.
So who's, in your particular case, who's making that decision?
We, head of systems and architecture, we decided to put email in the cloud. And more phishing emails and stuff came in like that. And it hasn't stopped anything. Using other tools, it still doesn't stop anything.
Okay. Well,
and they come in.
So I don't.
It's Microsoft that's a big problem. They don't shut any of these things down.
Well, I don't know who made the decision in your particular example to move email to the cloud, but if you have.
It's cheaper. It was supposed to be cheaper. But
Okay.
when all these workstations or something get infected, that's what I kind of do. I look at these and say, okay, how many people got it? Let me go look at the vulnerability
Right.
reports and then create tickets for the tech. So the tech say, it might have been cheaper here, but it's more expensive here. It's causing more work there, but nobody's looking at that.
Right. Well, part of that is to have, part of the way you combat that is to have a system where you're capturing those metrics, to be able to understand that these are the phishing incidents that we maybe had before we went to the cloud. This was maybe the result of these phishing incidents and what was happening. People were or weren't clicking on them, but when they were clicking on them, these are the systems that were affected. And maybe that did change dramatically when you went to the cloud. I don't know. But you ultimately, you need to be able to track that information and understand what it takes to respond. I would submit that responding to a phishing incident is probably easier when it's in the cloud as opposed to having multiple on-prem solutions that you need to search out for all of the thousands of emails that potentially need to be deleted. If it's in the cloud, that's probably easier. But here's where having information on the security incident as it's being worked through the different stages and being able to actually report on that is going to give you that information. But I'm not saying you should or shouldn't move your email to the cloud. That's not what we're here to talk about.
I see this stats and I see what's going on. You have Active Directory, the cloud keeps getting hacked. You have stuff coming in. Microsoft does a big jack about a lot of things. And the techs are going crazy with some of these things. And nobody's listening. They don't bring it up to them. So.
Do you have a question?
Sort of.
Sorry.
At level 3 in your maturity model, that looks like a magical place that I'll never get to.
Right.
Can you tell us, maybe without naming names, give us a little bit of a success story or something, specifically about that level 3 organization that, for a business reason, decided we're tearing out our endpoint monitoring solution, for instance, and put in that new one, and it didn't fall over.
How about a major entertainment company that has a phishing problem? So they have a phishing problem, about 100,000 mailboxes, and they had somebody whose full-time job during the day was to respond to these phishing incidents, having to manually perform searches of their email solution, which was a combination of on-prem and cloud, and they would type commands, assuming they entered the command correctly, and it didn't error out when they pressed return. They would then go to lunch or go do whatever they have to do, come back, and hopefully their session hadn't timed out because it returned a result and then they got logged out. Through automation, they were able to look at the phishing incidents, understand where they were, click a couple of buttons to auto-populate a search field, maybe do a little tweaking on exactly what they wanted to search, then push a button. This, the system would then go out and automatically perform a search of the mailboxes, which would be stored in a database, present that list, and then they could review that list and say, yes, we're going to click this button, we're going to delete 5,000 messages or whatever it was. Click that button, have it optionally go to someone else in management to just get a quick eyes on that. Click a button, and then the deletion goes ahead and gets done in the background. So they had very little interaction, and they didn't need to monitor it. They didn't need to worry about what happens if the search result is returned, and then they get logged out of their session, and that result is gone or something like that. That would be a case of using some automation.
But more importantly, in that orchestrated remediation level, I have a mature organization with 100,000 mailboxes. CEO decides he likes, CrowdStrike instead of Symantec one day.
Yeah.
Let's tear that out. Let's roll that out across the organization and not have it break the orchestration. I just wonder how many times you've seen that process work as intended.
I would say where we're seeing that happen most frequently is with vulnerability scanners. They're using one of the big three and they want to switch to one of the other big three for whatever reason. With something like CrowdStrike, that's typically a case where that's additional threat intelligence that they want to use. This particular entertainment company, when we were implementing this, they were a CrowdStrike customer, and they were talking about when they get a particular, I forget what the service was that they had, but when they received this particular alert, that it was very credible, and they treated it as very, very credible information, and basically as the gospel. If CrowdStrike said, this is happening, they didn't have to do any more research. They had full confidence in CrowdStrike to then be able to react to it. So that's typically more threat intelligence than the other example I gave you. So let's talk about vulnerability response. Lose a lot of time trying to coordinate patching across multiple teams. It's very time critical to do patching, but there's a lot that can happen. We're having to involve other parts of the organization, asking them questions, checking on the status, right? Your vulnerability managers can't keep up. I'm going to skip through these. What this basically is just telling you, no common view of assets, really understanding what the business context is of that system that it has vulnerabilities that need to be patched. Not being able to really track whether or not they've been patched. To know that when security is asking or expecting IT operations to perform patching, to actually be able to check on the status of it and know that it's not going to get lost in a queue, that there's an automated method to be able to track that patching is being done, and to see it go into change management and go through the flight process and come out the other end as actually patched. So let's talk about how do you automate and scale that. So you want to start by having a way to automatically bring in those vulnerabilities from the scanner, and then to associate those vulnerabilities with the systems that are actually impacted with that. So those vulnerabilities might come in on different IP addresses because it's multi-homed. Could be a database server. where you've got different IP addresses for different functions, and you need to have the ability of really understanding that that's actually a patch that's going on, not 5 different systems, but one system. So you're not asking somebody to patch 5 things when it's really only one patch that it's going to take to do that. And to be able to prioritize that, to understand the technical information that comes in from the vulnerability scanner, but also, if you've worked with vulnerability scanners for a long time, you realize that no 2 vulnerability scanners are going to give you 100% identical vulnerability results on all of the assets in your organization. There's going to be a difference. Some of our customers have multiple vulnerability scanners because that's the size of their organization or different enclaves, and sometimes they have the ability to run multiple vulnerability scans against the same hosts. And so knowing that 2 scanners are reporting a vulnerability on the same system is more credible than one scanner saying this is a vulnerability and another scanner saying no, or I'm not sure, it could be a false positive. So that's information that you can use to prioritize. Then being able to assign or coordinate for remediation. What that means is understanding who needs to actually patch these vulnerabilities. Not bringing it into a spreadsheet and slicing and dicing it, sending it out, and waiting for somebody to get back to you and tell you that they've patched these vulnerabilities, but actually having an automated system where they can be put into different buckets of the groups, whether it's by platform, application, skill set, business service that it's providing, needs to be patched. And having those change requests leverage, or having those requests for patching, which is ultimately a change request, leverage the change management solution that you're already using in your organization. If you've already got a change management process and you've already got change requests going through a change management board for approval, or you've got processes where you need to start testing changes and patches sometimes, maybe that doesn't require approval in a non-production environment. A production environment, there needs to be a business approval process or a review process. Having that patching process be incorporated, so you're not working with somebody who's maybe got a spreadsheet, and as they're going to patch, they start creating change requests to track it, and maybe they forget once in a while, but having an automated end-to-end solution. And then at the end of the patching process, when the change request is closed, because it's been updated by somebody that says they've patched it, to actually perform an automated scan to verify that the patch was actually done successfully and the vulnerability has been patched. Or maybe they don't close the change requests. The automated scanning that occurs routinely picks up the fact that this vulnerability is now gone, and then it closes it for you. But having the ability to actually kick it off ad hoc when they update the change request is the way to do it. So having that end-to-end flow to really manage the change process for the patching, and having dashboards where the status of all of patching that needs to occur in the organization is really visible in one dashboard, so you know. Having the ability to have an executive or a high-level official in the organization come in and say, hey, I heard about this thing called WannaCry on the way in here. I don't know what it is, but I hear it's really bad. Are we susceptible to that, and what are we doing? And having a really easy way to put a group together based upon the WannaCry CVEs, and within minutes have a list of every single system in your organization that is vulnerable to this, and kick off an automated process where those change requests are created and start to go through that normal flow with prioritization to get people starting to work on those change requests. And as those that patching is completed, to automatically do a rescan to validate that, and have a dashboard where that can be tracked, where if you need to, you can share it with your management. And then I have, this is a corresponding slide to the security incident response. It's the maturity model. It's sort of the same thing. Spreadsheets, limited visibility, long response times. Who's using spreadsheets in some fashion for managing vulnerabilities in the room here? I'm guessing everybody, because everybody I talk to, if they don't have some kind of automated solution, is using spreadsheets, because it's easy, right? It's easy from an individual standpoint, but it's not effective or easy from a management overview standpoint.
Does it still count as a spreadsheet if you dump it to Excel and then make a Power BI out of it?
Yeah. Yeah. So the idea here is same as incident response, right? Being able to do that for automated prioritization for vulnerability model 1 or maturity model 1 is to be able to do that automated prioritization, grouping, assignment, single system of record, the visibility. We go out to customers that say, we're really not that advanced and all of this, like, automation towards the tail end and being able to rescan. This is really great. I just want to know what all my vulnerabilities are and what the status is of them. I mean, we've got somebody pretty major that we're working with, and they have way over 100,000 servers in their organization, and the guy's like, I just need a way to be able to get the visibility to really truly understand where my vulnerabilities are and be able to manipulate this information on the fly, not in a spreadsheet, but on the fly, and be able to group these things and click a button and have that start down the path of assigning those change requests and having people work on them and track that and report that up to my management. He's like, you get me that, you get me out of spreadsheets, and he's like, I'm going to be so happy. He's like, all this other stuff, the automated owner assignment and the full life cycle and maybe updating the CMDB with information. He's like, that's all great. He's like, just get me out of spreadsheets. He's like, I'm being crushed by spreadsheets. I can't report to my management what's happening and why this is important and where the vulnerabilities are. So that's a biggie. So what it looks like is, in our world, in the ServiceNow world, is that you have detection solutions, you have vulnerability solutions, and we support more than just the short list that you're seeing here, but these are some of the big names. And then you have the SIM. So for detection, it's usually coming in through the SIM, but sometimes it might be coming in directly to ServiceNow. And then you have the threat intelligence, which we can use to help with the prioritization, to understand from a technical standpoint what the threat really is, what the vulnerability really is. I'm going to ignore Okta for a second, but that would have to do with just general integration and being able to shut off users and force password resets and things like that. And then have that information come into the ServiceNow platform where you've got the workflows, the automation, you've got post-incident review capability. That's something we can do too at the end of a security incident, as all that's documented. Have information in the CMDB, look up that information to understand the business context, and then do things like the orchestration, the quarantine host, firewall block, email search and delete, get running processes, network statistics, right? Not 5 minutes later, but as soon as a security incident is created, kick off an automated process to get this information. This is going to be important to law enforcement or forensics later. Have all of this in a post-incident review document where you have that for law enforcement, but you also just have the ability to just say, we want to look at some incidents and just sort of perform that post-incident analysis to just understand how did it work. Is there anything that the analyst did manually which we can automate for the future? Okay. So a little bit about the CMDB. If you have information in the CMDB, which is Configuration Management Database, then you can start to see what the actual business context is. You can go into a screen and you can say, I want to see my security incidents and I want to see if they're related to a set of systems that are involved in delivering a particular service or business, right? You can look at your vulnerabilities and see if there's a pattern. Be able to see the change history. All of a sudden there's a bunch of vulnerabilities in this cluster of database servers, and then because everything's tied together, you can say, oh geez, within the last 2 weeks, there have been a whole bunch of changes that were made to install a new application or something like that. There's a pattern here. These vulnerabilities didn't exist previously because the vulnerability may exist and you don't know about it until a vulnerability scanner becomes aware of the fact that they have new information about a vulnerability. But a lot of times things happen because there was a change. Everything was fine and now all of a sudden it's not working right. Somebody may have made a change which introduced the opportunity for a vulnerability, right? And then the scanner picked it up. So understanding the business impact before taking action is really important, because then the business gets involved, because you're providing a service to people, right, as government, and that needs to happen, but there's a balance of the security and needing to maybe shut down something because it's really bad, or take something offline to fix it. And that's where you can have that collaboration between the IT security folks, the IT operations folks, who typically are the ones that have to actually do the work, fix whatever it is, and then the business people who need to understand, how does this all relate together? You're telling me I need to take these systems down and patch them right away, and you're telling me, and I know from the information in the CMDB that it's going to completely knock this offline. I can't do this. It's Tuesday. Is there any way this can wait until Saturday when this is normally not available, right? Be able to show the impact, be able to explain the importance of it, and work collaboratively to make a decision. Do we defer this, and what are the risks, or can we actually go ahead and do that? So.
When you're talking about, excuse me, vulnerabilities, it looks like you're just talking about servers, not endpoints like workstation.
I'm including everything.
That's weird.
What's weird?
We don't get business owners only get alerts on a workstation. They just look at different data and create tickets and stuff like that.
But the people who have workstations or laptops are part of a particular business unit or
I'm not
department, right?
I just create a ticket for them. Usually they call me. Our security orchestration says there's no stupid question. I should have shot myself in the foot. That's beside the point. And they usually come to us, but they never once when they say no.
Well, whether you include the business in a decision to patch all of the desktops in a particular department because they have a critical vulnerability and they're not going to be able to do their job, that's an organization decision as to whether or not the business is involved in that.
No, I'm going to say, oh, if we patch it, then this isn't going to run. I've heard that for so long, and it's the best excuse everybody comes up with not patching. So anyway, usually it's very minor, not as major as it used to be, if it did, or it's just, in my opinion, I said it's just a
Right.
stupid excuse for being lazy, but that's beside the point.
Well, but the issue here is to understand that there's a vulnerability and to understand what the risk is and to understand what it affects. And then make a decision as to what you're going to do with it or
I
not.
get scared sometimes. They call and say, oh, no, somebody says this person did it. No, it's okay, it's okay. So, usually you have to calm down, but they
Right.
like to know that there's a place to go to.
Well, sometimes the vulnerability is mitigated by the network architecture or the firewalls in place or other things, in which case that can be communicated to the business. This is a really serious vulnerability, but it's mitigated right now. It can wait until the weekend.
Yeah, until, like I said, your Active Directory in the cloud gets hacked. Well, it doesn't really work that way.
So
I haven't seen it work that way.
So we're running out of time, but
Okay.
so just to wrap this up is that if you look at some of the research reports, Forrester is saying, it's a number 3 technology prediction for 2018, and I can tell you that we're very busy. People are very interested in this. A lot of different different technology companies are all jumping into this space, which validates that there's a real interest in it. And the adoption of SOAR tools is expected to increase 15 times by 2020. I believe that from what I've seen. And that automated threat detection tasks will increase in 2018. We all want to get to that point where everything is fully automated end to end. You can't get there with an endpoint solution. It just doesn't have that touch point capability. But that's the goal that we're trying to get to at ServiceNow, is end-to-end automation from security incident, discovery and vulnerability detection all the way through the end. But until we get there, having everything coming into a central point, being able to report on it, have that visibility, have the tracking, being able to perform a great deal of automation and orchestration is going to get us closer to that.
How much personal resources would it take to do this? Would you be managed services?
Well, we're not a managed service provider. This is ServiceNow is a solution that you own and operate. It's a SaaS solution, but it's a solution that you own and operate.
And how many people does it take to do that?
I can't answer that question. That would depend
Ballpark
upon.
figure?
I don't know any information about your organization. We have many different applications. Security incident response and vulnerability are only 2 of dozens. And so one organization might buy us strictly for this, which has happened. More typically, our customers more typically, it's an existing customer that already has ITSM. They already have change management. Everyone in the organization is already on ServiceNow, and then it makes sense to start adding the applications because they have purchased us as a platform with the intention to reimagine a lot of what's going on and a lot of what the work is in the organization.
So when you're talking about change management, like this ServiceNow change management instead of the homegrown one?
ServiceNow is a SaaS application which at its heart is a workflow engine, and change management, IT service management was the first application that we had. And then we started adding to that some years ago. Yeah. Yeah. So I'll skip that. So savings here, obviously, but the really big benefit is the increase in responsiveness, the increase in throughput, whether you're responding to an incident and you're taking it all the way through, containing it, eradicating it, and closing it, and having that post-incident review process at the end that you can look at, having all the metrics, the statistics, the KPIs to be able to report what is happening and being able to report to management what has happened and what is happening, and really the same thing for vulnerabilities, to really getting that big picture of what's happening with your vulnerabilities. Vulnerability management solutions create a lot of work, but they don't help you do the work. The work doesn't get done in a vulnerability management solution. It's really not a vulnerability management solution. It's really more of a vulnerability assessment solution. At the end of the day, it's still really people in typically IT operations doing the work and doing it ideally in a change management system where that information is tracked, it's logged. If there are approvals that need to happen, they can happen, and tying that in to the bigger picture of just overall IT security. So the strategies for getting started would be to start small. Don't think of automation end-to-end. The conversation we had earlier where I was sort of like the basics, start with the basics, get out of spreadsheets, start being able to track what's happening, start being able to collect metrics on it, understand where your real pain points are, and then find the use cases that make sense. There are esoteric things that people want to do with automation. You ask yourself, how often are we realistically going to do this? What is it we're going to do the most? Maybe it's blocking the port. It's probably more like deleting phishing emails. It's probably going to be the #1 use case. But maybe blocking a port or isolating a host is important. But then what are the ramifications of doing that, right? And when do we decide that we want to do that? And when we decide we want to do that, do we want to get an approval from somebody before we actually do that? Or do we want the analyst, based upon a playbook, to be able to push a button and have it done? And ultimately, when you're going to block a port or isolate a host, there's work that has to happen after that to remove whatever the issue is, whether it's patch a vulnerability or remove malware, and then bring that back online, like what we were talking about at lunch. So that's it. Any thoughts? Any comments?
Just want to hear your personal opinion. One of the slides you mentioned about 2 million or so security professional job vacancies that's going to be in the near future.
Right.
What do you think will be the driving force or the driving factor for the businesses to fill that gap? The lack of talent is there, right? But either someone has the need to fill that gap is not going to go away.
Right.
So when the businesses are faced with not finding the right security professional to do the work, what do you think will be their decision to protect their enterprises?
I think the driving factor is that you have disruption to your business, and you're not able to resolve it as quickly as you wish to because you don't have the people, the processes, or the technology. We're really good at going out and buying technology. That's kind of easy, right? In a lot of ways, buying technology is easy, and hiring people is not that difficult, really. But putting together a process of how to really maximize that investment with the people and the technology, that takes a lot more work, because you really have to sit and think that through and have meetings and talk to other people in the organization and then try it out, implement it. Is the process right? But once you've got that process right, things take off. That's where you're able to start to get the economy of scale of all that work. I mean, I've talked to companies that say, hey, this is really great, but just trying to figure out how we want to automatically assign our vulnerabilities to people based upon whatever factors is a lot of work. Well, you're doing that every day with your spreadsheet. So is it really that much harder to sit down and actually think about what you basically document what you're doing with your spreadsheet every day, and then figuring out 80 or 90% of this can actually be programized can be implemented in a digital workflow that's going to happen automatically. You're going to have exceptions. A WannaCry virus is an exception. So now, okay, what do we have for there? Okay, now we have a crisis workflow. How do we want to handle a crisis, right? Because that's not specific to something. It's like you get to the point where on a day-to-day basis, you come in, you look at your vulnerability work queue, if that's your role, and you just start working through it, and everything's prioritized for you. And maybe you can run some automation with some tools for some of this, and maybe you can't. Management can see what's happening, because you're going to have out-of-band vulnerabilities to deal with from time to time, and they're going to know how it affects you because they've got the visibility, right? Otherwise, we're all just scrambling around, responding to security incidents, responding to vulnerabilities, just scrambling. And we're scrambling, and it's really inefficient because of email and spreadsheets and no real tracking and updating spreadsheets and responding to emails. Did you patch this? Did you patch this? When's that going to be done? When's that going to be done? You said this was going to be done. This is really important. Are you still taking the system down over the weekend? If you're on a single system of record and you have the ability, you have a solution where that process can be tracked and you can schedule work to be done, and people can go into a view and can see how their business systems are affected, because people are typically they just care about the systems that affect them, right? What they're responsible for, or if it's like a business owner or a department head, just their systems for whatever service it is that they're providing to the business, right? Yeah.
So, implementing the security practice is not a choice. They must do it to stay in business.
Yes. Well, we all have to. Because at the end of the day, whatever our business is, whether it's government or private, it's to provide a service to somebody, right? And so you can't provide that service if your systems aren't working. And people aren't going to come to work if they're not getting paid, because right, as we heard during lunch, people are going to start looking for another job, and now you're really in bad shape, right? So I thought the presentation at lunch was awesome, because you got the perspective of business people who don't care about the technology. You had the one person who said, how am I going to pay my employees, or how am I going to pay my vendors? They don't care what systems are involved, but we're down in the trenches, and so maybe we do. But at the end of the day, from an emergency management standpoint and a standpoint of addressing everything, it really was about, well, what are the priorities? We need to get this system back online, or we need to get this process back online. And what are the systems that are part of it, and what do we need to do? It wasn't really so much as it wasn't about an individual system as it was about what the state of Colorado was doing as a business, right, CDOT has to do this.
You hear about skills shortage and a need for all of these unfilled information security roles. It sounds a little bit like FUD, a little bit of trying to scare whoever it is that you're selling your thing to, because it's always security, either practitioners or vendors or something that are sort of bringing that up. And the problem with saying that is the organizations don't know that. It's not the organization saying, I have 6 InfoSec jobs that I can't fill. What's going on? It's the one guy in the SOC going, I need help, I need help, I need help. And that's where that's driving from. If your company has 15 trucks and 3 drivers, it's very obvious you're not moving those trucks that don't have drivers.
Right.
There's a very clear business.
Right. You can see that. Anybody can see that.
So in a previous life, I was the guy screaming, I need help, I need help, I need help. And my boss would say, I don't know, show me. I don't
Right.
understand. I'm too busy, I can't show you. This is a true story. I rolled up ITOP, free open source CMDB help desk thing. And I just sent out an email and said, I can't answer the phone anymore. Submit an email to this thing, I'll create a ticket for you, and I'm on my way. 6 months later, there was like 900 unanswered tickets, because that was the demonstration of the fact I just can't get to your stuff.
Right.
Here's all the things I'm doing. I'm working on tickets every day. But the volume coming in is more than, I got 2 guys, just based on that. 2 new techs. All right, now we're doing some work. So if you apply that to your information security practice, to your SOC, whatever, it's that same thing. You're saying,
Right.
I have all of these incidents that are coming in, but I can only respond in so many ways or at a certain rate.
Right.
And now your business is going to be impacted in
Right.
this many ways, which translates to this many dollars, possibly you'll get those.
Right. And you get somebody that says, well, that's not acceptable. What do you need in order to make it happen? I need more money, I need more technology. And maybe the answer is, no, we don't have that. Maybe the answer is, I need more data from you to take it up another notch or two in the organization to justify it. Because there's always money. Money is being spent every day. There's always money. It's going somewhere else.
It's a matter if you're the department that gets it.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Now, in government, there's less ability to take from one area to move to another, but there are still sometimes capabilities within departments, right? In business, it's almost always possible, in a public, private, it's almost always possible to move money from one place to another. You just have to get to the person that is in control of it, who decides it's going to happen.
In your scenario, they go out and buy more trucks, right? You need more drivers, but they buy more trucks.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I hope that was helpful.